The crystalline spires of Starbase Omega sparkled against the backdrop of swirling nebula gases, its transparent corridors filled with representatives from 100 worlds. Commander Jenna Hayes stood at the observation deck, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she watched the approaching vessels. Each ship carried delegations for the Galactic Council's annual symposium on dangerous species management, though none of them could guess what Earth had brought this time. "Commander, the Council is ready for Earth's presentation," Lieutenant Rook said, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on her face. She nodded, the ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "And our guest?" she asked. "Stable in the containment bay. Though I must note that several species have already filed formal protests about bringing an unclassified apex predator aboard the station. They file protests about everything we do, Rook. That's practically tradition by now." The main chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward in elegant curves, its seats arranged in concentric circles that rose like the petals of some vast flower. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the chamber with a cacophony of colors, shapes, and sizes. Some floated in containment fields, others sat in pools of specific atmospheric mixtures, but all fell silent as Commander Hayes took the center platform. High Counselor Zilax of the Vidaran Collective raised all four of their eye stalks. "Commander Hayes, Earth's reputation for unconventional approaches precedes you. I trust this year's presentation will not result in another evacuation of the station." Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber. 3 years ago, Earth's demonstration of peaceful coexistence with modified Australian box jellyfish had ended with 3 flooded decks and a very angry Medusan delegation. "No evacuations planned today, High Counselor," Hayes replied, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. "Though I do hope to challenge some assumptions about what we consider dangerous." She activated her holoprojector, and the chamber filled with images of Earth's most feared predators, lions, tigers, bears, wolves, alongside humans working with them. For millennia, humanity has learned to coexist with apex predators. Not through dominance, not through technology, but through understanding. While the galaxy has focused on containment and control, we've discovered something different: respect. A Nexian representative's tentacles writhed in agitation. "Respect? For mindless killing machines? Commander, your species' reckless approach to Dash. Is that what you see?" Hayes interrupted, gesturing to an image of a human wildlife researcher sleeping peacefully beside a full-grown lion. "A mindless killing machine? Or is it possible that our definition of intelligence, of consciousness, of worth, might be too narrow?" She tapped her comm unit. "Bring in our guest." The massive doors at the chamber's base slowly opened, and the assembled representatives gasped collectively. Through the doorway came the most massive Shadowstalker ever recorded, its chitinous armor gleaming like polished obsidian, its 4 rows of crimson eyes glowing like dying stars. Beside it walked a single human woman, her dark skin marked with the traditional scars of an Earth Ranger, her movements perfectly in sync with the creature. "This is Ranger Amara Kuri in Nova," Hayes continued over the growing murmurs of alarm. "The Shadowstalker you see beside her has been responsible for destroying 3 automated mining operations on Proxima b. Previous attempts to eliminate or contain it failed. 17 deaths were attributed to it before Ranger Kuri made contact." "Made contact?" High Counselor Zilax's voice quavered slightly. "Commander, that creature is known to hunt in the dark matter streams between stars. It's evolved specifically to prey on starships. And yet," Hayes said softly, "here she stands, beside a human, on your station." As if to emphasize the point, Amara reached up and placed her hand on Nova's armored shoulder. The massive creature lowered its head, allowing the touch. The chamber erupted in chaos. Demands for immediate containment mixed with calls for Hayes' arrest. Several representatives simply fled their seats. Through it all, Amara and Nova remained perfectly still, a tableau of impossible cooperation. Hayes raised her hand for silence. "We're not here to scare you. We're here to show you something new. For too long, the galaxy has treated apex predators as problems to be solved. We want to show you another way. And if your other way results in casualties? A Thalaxian representative demanded. Then I offer myself as the first potential casualty, Hayes replied calmly. I will personally oversee this demonstration over the next 3 days. If at any point Nova shows signs of aggression, I will authorize whatever measures the Council deems necessary. The High Counselor's eye stalks wavered between Hayes and the Shadow Stalker. You would stake your life on this theory? I already have. Hayes smiled. The real question is, are you willing to learn something new about the beings you feared for so long? As the council chambers descended into heated debate, Hayes caught Amara's eye and nodded slightly. Whatever came next, Earth had made its point. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't a predator's claws or teeth, but rather the human willingness to reach out and touch them. The observation deck of Starbase Omega had been transformed into a makeshift demonstration area, with reinforced barriers keeping the curious crowd at a safe distance. Commander Hayes watched as Ranger Amara moved through a series of exercises with Nova, the Shadowstalker's massive form flowing like liquid darkness. Remarkable control, muttered Dr. Voss, the Centaurian xenobiologist whose tentacles twitched with each movement of the creature. But surely this is merely behavioral conditioning? Some form of neural modification? No modifications, Amara answered, her voice carrying across the space. Nova is exactly as we found her. The only thing we changed was our approach. She produced what looked like a simple metal sphere from her pocket. Would you like to see? The crowd pressed closer to the barriers as Amara tossed the sphere into the air. Nova's crimson eyes tracked it, and in a movement almost too fast to follow, the massive predator snatched it from the air with one of her secondary appendages. Instead of crushing it, she began to manipulate it with surprising dexterity, solving the puzzle mechanism hidden within. Impossible, breathed High Counselor Zilax, who had insisted on observing personally. Shadowstalkers are pure predatory instinct. They don't play. Everything plays, Commander Hayes interjected. We just haven't been looking for it in the right ways. The demonstration continued, with Amara showing how Nova could distinguish between different geometric shapes, respond to complex verbal commands, and even mimic simple patterns. The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as the galaxy's most feared predator displayed intelligence that defied all previous classification. But not everyone was convinced. Ambassador Krell of the Thraxian Empire pushed through the crowd, his crystalline form vibrating with agitation. This is propaganda. A sophisticated deception. No predator species has ever demonstrated such capabilities. Perhaps, Hayes suggested quietly, because no one ever gave them the chance. Before Krell could respond, the station's lights flickered ominously. Nova's head snapped up, all 4 rows of eyes focusing on the ceiling. A low, resonant growl echoed through the chamber. What's wrong? Hayes asked, noting how the Shadowstalker's armor plates had begun to ripple with tension. She senses something, Amara replied, placing a calming hand on Nova's flank. Something that shouldn't be here. The station's AI crackled to life. Warning. Unknown energy signature detected in lower maintenance sectors. All personnel, please proceed to designated safety zones. The crowd's nervous murmuring turned to panic as the lights flickered again, this time accompanied by a deep vibration that seemed to come from the station's very core. Nova's growl grew louder, but instead of attacking, she moved closer to Amara, assuming a protective stance. Fascinating, Dr. Voss whispered. It's protecting her. Commander, Lieutenant Rook's voice came through Hayes's comm unit, we're detecting multiple breaches in the lower hulls. Something's cutting its way in from the void. Hayes watched as Nova's behavior grew more agitated, but noticed how the creature kept looking back at Amara, as if seeking guidance. This was the moment of truth. Would the Shadowstalker revert to its predatory nature under stress, as the skeptics claimed it must? Ranger Curry, Hayes called out, how confident are you in your partnership with Nova? Amara's scarred face broke into a fierce grin. Completely, Commander. Then I suggest we show our guests what a human predator team can really do. Hayes turned to address the increasingly panicked crowd. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all designations, I suggest you clear the observation deck. It seems we're about to have an unscheduled demonstration of exactly why Earth's approach to dangerous species might be more valuable than you realized. As the station shuddered again, Hayes couldn't help but smile at the irony. They'd come to prove that humanity could work with nature's most dangerous creatures, and now some unknown threat was giving them the perfect opportunity to prove it. Nova's armor began to shimmer with that peculiar energy that had made Shadowstalkers the terror of space, but this time it wasn't directed at the assembled aliens. Instead, the creature positioned itself between the crowd and the direction of the disturbance, its massive form a barrier of living darkness. Ranger Curry, Hayes called out as emergency sirens began to wail, I believe you and Nova have work to do. Amara swung herself onto Nova's back with practiced ease, finding purchase between the creature's armored plates. Ready when you are, Commander. Though I should warn you, Nova gets a bit excited about protecting her new friends. The last thing the astonished council members saw before being evacuated was the impossible sight of a human riding a Shadowstalker into battle, both of them moving as one being, united in purpose. As they disappeared into the lower levels of the station, High Counselor Zilax turned all four eye stalks to Hayes. Commander, if your ranger and that creature survive this, the council may need to seriously reconsider its position on human methods. Hayes watched the security feeds as Amara and Nova moved through the darkened corridors, the Shadowstalkers' natural ability to navigate in darkness making them the perfect team to face whatever was breaching the station. That's exactly what we're counting on, High Counselor. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show us what's possible when we stop fearing the unknown and start working with it instead. The lower levels of Starbase Omega had transformed into a maze of shadows and emergency lighting. Through the station's security feeds, Commander Hayes watched as Amara and Nova moved like a single entity through the darkness, the Shadowstalker's natural bioluminescence casting an eerie glow against the metal walls. Multiple contacts, Lieutenant Rook reported, his cybernetic eye processing the sensor data. There, it's unlike anything in our database, Commander. Through the static-filled cameras, Hayes could see them, writhing forms of pure energy, slipping through the station's hull as if it were tissue paper. They moved with a terrible purpose, consuming power conduits and leaving dead zones in their wake. Energy vampires, Dr. Voss whispered, his tentacles coiling tightly. We thought they were extinct. They feed on power sources, growing stronger with each absorption. The more energy they consume, the more powerful they become, Hayes finished. And we've just given them an all-you-can-eat buffet. Nova's growl echoed through the comm system as another entity materialized through the hull nearby. But instead of attacking, the Shadowstalker held position, waiting for Amara's signal. The Ranger's hand rested steadily on Nova's armor plate, a touch that conveyed volumes without words. They're heading for the reactor core, Rook announced. If they reach it. They won't, Amara's voice crackled through the comm. Nova can sense their energy signatures. We can head them off at Junction 47. High Counselor Zilax's eye stalks trembled. You cannot be serious. You're going to trust the safety of this station to a predator's instincts? No, Hayes replied calmly. We're going to trust the partnership between that predator and her human companion. There's a difference. On the screens, Amara and Nova had reached the junction. The Shadowstalker's armor began to pulse with that distinctive dark energy that had made their species so feared. But now, under Amara's guidance, that power had purpose. Nova's species evolved to hunt in the void between stars, Amara explained through the comm. They don't just consume energy like our uninvited guests, they can manipulate it. Ready, girl. The Shadowstalker's response was a resonant hum that made the station's metal bones vibrate. As the energy vampires approached, drawn by the power signatures, Nova began to move. It wasn't the savage attack everyone expected. Instead, the creature performed what could only be described as a dance, its movements creating complex patterns of dark energy that formed a net. "Remarkable," Dr. Voss breathed. "She's creating a containment field using her natural abilities. But how is she maintaining such precise control?" "Through trust," Hayes said. "Amara learned Nova's natural patterns and Nova learned to work with Amara's guidance. Together, they can do what neither could do alone." The energy vampires, drawn by the power signatures, found themselves trapped in Nova's web of dark energy. Each attempt to feed on it only strengthened the containment field. Amara's voice was steady as she guided Nova through the complex movements required to maintain the trap. But the strain was showing. Nova's bioluminescent markings were pulsing erratically, and Amara's voice grew increasingly tense. "We can hold them, but we can't contain them forever. Commander, we need a plan." Hayes turned to Dr. Voss. "Doctor, if these creatures feed on energy, what happens if they consume too much at once?" The Centaurian's eyes widened. "Theoretically, they would destabilize. But the amount of power required—" "Nova can handle it," Amara interrupted. "But I'll need access to the station's power grid." "All of it?" High Counselor Zilaxa's eye stalks went rigid. "Absolutely not. You want us to give a Shadow Stalker access to our entire power supply? The very creature that evolved to destroy our ships?" Hayes met the High Counselor's gaze steadily. "Yes. Because right now, that creature and her human partner are the only thing standing between us and complete destruction. Sometimes survival requires trust." For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the High Counselor studied the screens, watching as Nova and Amara continued their deadly dance with the energy vampires. Finally, all four eye stalks dipped in assent. "Lieutenant Rook," Hayes commanded, "give them access." "All of it." What happened next would be debated in council chambers for years to come. Nova's natural ability to manipulate energy, combined with the station's full power output and guided by Amara's steady hand, created something entirely new. The Shadow Stalker became a living conduit, channeling power into the trapped energy vampires until they couldn't contain it anymore. The resulting implosion was devastating, but controlled. When the emergency lights finally stabilized, Nova stood in the center of the junction, her armor smoking slightly, with Amara still seated firmly on her back. "Target neutralized," Amara reported calmly, though her voice shook with exhaustion. "Though I think Nova might need a snack and a nap." As if in response, the Shadow Stalker made a sound that was surprisingly close to a purr. "Well, High Counselor," Hayes said into the stunned silence that followed, "still think Earth's approach to dangerous species is reckless?" Zilaxa's eye stalks swayed thoughtfully. Perhaps we have been too quick to judge. Both your species, Commander Hayes, and the ones we've labeled as merely dangerous. Trust in the dark." The aftermath of the energy vampire incident left Starbase Omega humming with activity and whispered conversations. In the main medical bay, Ranger Amara sat patiently as doctors of various species examined both her and Nova. The Shadow Stalker remained unusually still, allowing the scrutiny with what could only be described as resigned tolerance. "Extraordinary," muttered Dr. Voss, waving a scanner over Nova's armored hide. "The symbiotic energy patterns between Ranger and creature are unlike anything we've documented. It's as if they've developed a shared biological frequency." Commander Hayes stood at the observation window, watching the proceedings with Lieutenant Rook. "That's what we've been trying to tell the Council. These relationships aren't about control or dominance. They're about harmony." A sharp alarm suddenly pierced the relative quiet. Rook's cybernetic eye whirred as he accessed the station systems. "Commander, we're detecting massive power fluctuations in the lower decks. The energy vampires' attack damaged more than we thought. The reactor containment fields are failing," Dr. Voss announced, his tentacles writhing in distress. The feedback loop could tear the station apart. Hayes watched as Nova's head snapped up, all 4 rows of eyes focusing in the direction of the disturbance. The creature didn't growl or show aggression, instead, it looked at Amara, waiting. "We can fix this," Amara said, standing despite the medical team's protests. "Nova can sense the energy patterns. We can help stabilize them, but we'll need to get closer to the core." High Counselor Zilax, who had just entered the medical bay, turned all eye stalks toward Hayes. "Commander, your team has already proven their worth, but this, the reactor core, is too delicate. One mistake could destroy the station," Hayes finished. "But doing nothing will definitely destroy it. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all." The High Counselor's eye stalks swayed in their species equivalent of a deep sigh. "Very well. But I'm accompanying you. If we're going to trust, let's trust completely." A new understanding. The reactor core of Starbase Omega pulsed with unstable energy, its usual steady blue glow now a chaotic storm of colors. Nova moved carefully through the chamber, each step precisely placed, with Amara guiding her movements through gentle touches and whispered words. High Counselor Zilax watched in fascination as the Shadow Stalker began to resonate with the reactor's energy frequency. "It's attempting to harmonize with the core's oscillation patterns," they observed. "Just as it does with the Ranger. That's humanity's real gift to the galaxy," Hayes said quietly. "Not our technology or our strength, but our ability to see the possibility of connection where others see only threat." Nova had positioned herself near the reactor's main containment field. The creature's natural energy manipulation abilities began to work in concert with the station's systems, guided by Amara's intuitive understanding of her partner's capabilities. Together, they created a stabilizing resonance that gradually brought the chaotic energy patterns back into alignment. The process took hours, during which time representatives from every major species in the Galactic Council gathered to witness something they had never thought possible, a human and one of the galaxy's most feared predators working in perfect harmony to save the very civilization that had once sought to eliminate their kind. When the reactor finally stabilized, Nova slumped in exhaustion, her massive form trembling slightly. Amara immediately went to her partner's side, checking her condition with the care one might show a beloved family member. "I believe," High Counselor Zilax announced to the assembled crowd, "that we owe both our human friends and our previous assumptions an apology. The Council will be reconvening to discuss a complete revision of our dangerous species protocols." Commander Hayes smiled. "Does this mean Earth's approach is finally getting official recognition?" "More than that," the High Counselor replied. "We want to establish a joint training program. If humanity can forge these kinds of bonds, perhaps it's time we learned how to do the same. Though," they added, eye stalks swaying in amusement, "perhaps we should start with something smaller than a shadow stalker." The chamber filled with mixed sounds of laughter and chittering from various species. Even Nova seemed to join in, making a sound that resembled a deep, resonant chuckle. "Commander Hayes," Amara called out, still stroking Nova's armored head, "I think we're going to need a bigger training facility." "And better snacks," Hayes added, watching as Nova perked up at the word. "Lots of better snacks." As the gathered representatives began discussing plans for the future, Hayes couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had come to demonstrate a possibility, and instead had helped forge the beginning of a new era of interspecies cooperation. All it had taken was the willingness to reach out, to trust, and to believe that even the most feared creatures in the galaxy might just be waiting for someone to see them as more than monsters. In the end, that was humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy, not the ability to tame the untamable, but the wisdom to know that sometimes, the best way to deal with something frightening was to try to understand it first. Nova's purring resonated through the chamber, a sound that would have once sent everyone running in terror. Now it was just another voice in the symphony of species learning to work together, one connection at a time. The end.